We are pleased to introduce Joseph Lubin. He is the founder and CEO of Consensus. He will be joining our host He as a fireside chat on Shanghai Upgrade and the future of Web3. Hi, Mr. Lubin. Welcome to the East Shanghai Summit.
I'm going to hit record. Great.
Okay,
Awesome.
got it. And all right, 1 sec. Let me turn off a couple of things.
Just, yeah, whenever you're ready, we can cut the first part out.
This should work.
Yep.
Great. What's it?
Perfect. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Joe, for coming to East Shanghai virtually. My name
Thanks
is
for having me.
Yeah, we were super excited to have this talk, and the developers that are present today are excited to hear your thoughts and insights about industry and Ethereum and its future. But to start with, since this is about East Shanghai, could you share some of your memories, personal memories, industry memories about Shanghai?
So I've been to Shanghai a couple of times, and certainly the most memorable was for DevCon 2. DevCon 2 was a huge Ethereum conference. It was definitely a breakout conference in terms of awareness of the world. DevCon 1 sort of helped us understand that what we were doing in our tiny little bubble was being heard and seen by others, and I think maybe 700 people gathered in London. And DevCon 2 was way bigger, so it was really on a world stage. And I guess the most notable, there were a lot of notable things at that event, but most notable were denial of service attacks, which started the first morning of the conference, and plagued us for a small number of days. It was a really interesting situation where somebody who knew the protocol incredibly well was trying to attack the protocol for either financial reasons or other kinds of business reasons, or just to help us understand where the protocol needed improvements and hardening. And I remember our Infura team was working all night with other teams to try to fix things, and it was an exciting time back then.
Certainly very, very memorable. Yeah. And then in terms of East Shanghai Upgrade, could you comment a little bit on like what do you think is the importance of that, and in terms of the development of Ethereum, having seen such an evolution along the way?
Well, we have this thing called the merge coming up. The merge essentially unites the Ethereum 1 execution chain with the Ethereum 2 consensus chain, and transitions the whole Ethereum situation from proof of work to proof of stake, and that has lots of goodness, including massive reduction in the carbon footprint by 99.95%, and the ushering in of ultrasound money and greater decentralization, etc. But the merge is when ultrasound money actually arrives, but we'll still be operating on the execution chain. Not much will change, and it will be, fingers crossed, a very smooth transition for developers, and for users shouldn't be noticeable, except the world will stop heating up a little bit. That might be noticeable. So smaller carbon footprint, lower barrier to entry to become a validator, therefore much greater decentralization. But that first phase of evolving towards serenity, towards a single unified Ethereum ecosystem, will be accomplished. It's looking like Q3. So it looks like the merge is going to happen for the Roston testnet, and then a couple of other testnets starting around June 8, I believe. And fingers crossed, we'll maybe sometime in August we'll get the mainnet merge. Shanghai is when beacon chain withdrawals happen. There's a bunch of things planned for Shanghai and it may end up being really quite large as an upgrade. Essentially the execution chain and the consensus chain will really start to become integrated into a more coherent single system. There will be beacon chain withdrawals, so Ether will be able to move bidirectionally across the chains. There will be a pretty cool upgrade to the Ethereum virtual machine object format. It's essentially, it enables account abstraction, control flow in the Ethereum virtual machine. It enables EIP 3074, which sort of a delegation mechanism enabling externally owned accounts to effectively delegate control to smart contracts. So a very powerful construct will be introduced. Layer 2 fee reductions, enabling layer 2s to get much more efficient. And there's a handful more pieces, but yeah, that's the main event. And another element is that for the layer 2 fee reductions, there may be a sort of sharding construct introduced potentially, and that would be the start of the next phase of upgrading, where data availability is brought to the situation, and Ethereum is modularizing from a monolithic protocol where everything is in one protocol to a modular protocol where security is in a module and execution is in sort of a module, and then guaranteed data availability is in a module, and that'll start us in that direction to teasing apart the three modules. The execution modules are already in pretty full swing, sitting on top of layer 1 right now, and adding a lot of scalability. And this third piece, when we get to real data availability sharding, that will put scalability into overdrive.
Yeah, that's super exciting, and I know the entire developer community has been looking forward to the merge and all these development for a long time. So super excited to see this unfold later half of the year. Yeah, and I want to switch gears a little bit to talk more about like building and applications in Web3, and also there's been a lot of discussions kind of how Web2 will evolve into Web3 completely as we see kind of the industry grows. So do you think like Web2 will eventually evolve completely into Web3, or will there be the end game be more of a coexistence with Web3 applications? When do you think, in your opinion, will be like a turning point for Web3?
Well, the web protocols are pretty incremental. They built on top of the internet protocols. So Web 1 evolved into Web 2. Static pages added interactivity and a whole bunch of other kinds of goodness. And so from a technological standpoint, we'll still have the Web 1, Web 2 constructs, and we'll add Web 3 constructs. But from an economic, finance, and political perspective, we're going to turn the world completely upside down. So essentially, the way the world is organized is with a top-down trust vector, where authorities imbue intermediaries with other authority. That's how trust moves down the system, and it's generally done in a hierarchical fashion, whether it's militaries or governments or corporations. And this new kind of database construct, blockchain, when it's massively decentralized, it creates a trust foundation. And so trust can now be imbued bottom up. So this trust foundation, if it's massively decentralized, then we can all inspect the blockchain and see exactly what happened and when it happened. And it's economically enormously expensive to overturn that history. So that represents a new way of setting up ledgers. Historically, all these intermediaries down the hierarchy are maintaining ownership and rights and responsibilities in ledgers, but now the ledgers can be inspectable, open, and bottom up. And so the first layer on top of that new trust foundation that's enabled is global decentralized finance. And upon those two foundations, we're basically going to see all the intermediaries around the world disrupted because intermediaries tend to be extracting too much value from transactions and siloing information and power. And if you can replace a bunch of lawyers in a music company or film company with some smart contracts and other kinds of functions and people, you can get much more efficient. And so really the first industry that we're really seeing disintermediated in this flipping of our economy is the content creation and content ownership industry. So NFTs are really transforming things, and you'll see that happen, I think, over time to essentially every industry that has intermediaries, which is every industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And then NFTs have definitely been huge in the past 2 years, like seeing a lot of the massive adoptions and I think a broader awareness around the general users. Yeah, so we're really excited for this to unfold. And in terms of the incumbents, you have the industries that have like a lot of intermediaries, and also the Web2 tech giants like Meta and Twitter, who's been going through a lot of back and forth with the acquisition deals lately. Where do you see how would Web3 affect the current incumbents in Web2, in your opinion?
I guess it depends. So I think they'll still run their businesses for a long time for cohorts that they serve well already. The ethos is very different. The Web2 ethos is pretty exploitative of people's information and attention. The Web3 ethos is very respectful. You can think of sort of the traditional economy as being one run by corporations in a siloed fashion. I call it the age of silos, where they pretty much all have an adversarial relationship with their clients, their consumers. And as we move into the age of community, you'll see people and companies in different roles. Somebody's helping.
Yes.
This is little boy. You'll see people in companies in different roles who are actually aligned. So the mechanism design sets up incentives for them to perform different roles. And if they're part of a protocol or they're part of a DAO, a decentralized organization, they're all essentially working towards making this collective operate well and to have all of their needs served. And it's a much less adversarial approach. So organizations that figure that out, that choose to empower their clients rather than extract as much value while giving up as little value as possible, I think they'll do well.
Yeah, and then certainly in that segues into my next question. I'm really curious about the DAO governance that you just mentioned in Web3 and new way of organizing labor forces. So could you share a little bit of what do you how should Web3 companies think about DAO governance and designing incentive mechanisms, and what's consensus plan to build that up?
Yeah, so it's hard for me to talk about other companies. I can talk about consensus. So we're in a phase where we're accelerating our progressive decentralization, just as our whole industry, our whole ecosystem is. It's just part of our nature, part of our ethos. It's also being hastened, I think, by regulatory forces. Essentially, you can build decentralized systems that are mechanism. And if it's mechanism, then you might not be seen to be custodying assets for consumers or otherwise being a sort of financial intermediary. And so if we can build lots of mechanisms and just publish software, which is free speech, then that sort of activity shouldn't be regulated. So Consensus is working on a few protocols. One will be launching very soon. some pretty profound stuff coming out of our product teams, and we're also working on a bunch of DAOs. So we've announced Village DAO, which treats customer support as an ecosystem issue, understanding that there are lots of protocols that interact with one another, like Lego blocks, and they're accessed through MetaMask, and we need to make sure that that if somebody's having an issue, if a consumer's having an issue, that that issue gets routed properly. And so we're working to incentivize people in different communities, different DeFi communities, etc., to become expert in that product, and we're incentivizing people to share that expertise and help people in the ecosystem with any sort of support needs. So a bunch more DAOs coming.
Wow, that's super interesting. So it's really like a bottom-up approach to thinking about some of the service usually provided by the companies in the past, like customer support. Yeah. Could you share a bit more about, like the protocols that you mentioned that are down in the product lines? Anything in particular that you're really excited about? Watch out for that.
I can't steal thunder from our teams before they're ready.
Yeah. Okay. We'll definitely keep a close eye on that for sure. Yeah. And so switching a little bit away from talking the products to just overall Ethereum and its position in the industry. So there's been kind of the debate between the Bitcoin maximalists and the Ethereum maximalists in the past 2 years, and we've seen a lot of these like you said, like DeFi, DAOs, and NFTs getting reported in mainstream more and more. And Kathy Witt also said that Ethereum could displace a lot of the traditional financial services. Do you think where we are with Ethereum in terms of it going mainstream in different verticals at this point?
Yeah, so I'm a decentralized protocols maximalist, big fan of Bitcoin, big fan of Ethereum, big fan of Metropolitan Ethereum, as I started to call it, where lots of EVM networks and non-EVM networks are all essentially connecting up to one another and creating essentially a global decentralized super app of applications built on these decentralized protocols. And Ethereum is certainly at the hub of all of that. And bottom line, Bitcoin has a lot of mind share, and good chance it'll maintain that mind share as a store of value. Ethereum is a different kind of thing. It's a platform for building applications. Real fundamental economy is being built on it, and the token has fundamental value for that reason, because you need it to pay for transactions and storage. The technology is crossing the chasm, so real people are seeing real benefit in various different aspects of life right now. And interestingly, we're in terms of going mainstream. I think the merge is going to do that. I think there's going to be a tremendous separation of Ethereum from, in a sense, from the rest of the ecosystem, but it'll pull the ecosystem along. And the Ether token, we talked about ultrasound money. The Ether token is giving off yield, and it is deflationary, and so it's being burned in transactions. It's being frozen, staked in the protocol, staked in DeFi and DAOs and other systems. And so the supply-demand dynamics are really interesting, because supply is being pulled off the market, and the issuance in proof of stake, because it's so much less expensive to run, the issuance is going to be about 1/10 of the regular issuance of during proof of work. So it looks like the token is going to be experiencing very interesting supply-demand dynamics, and institutional investors are starting to notice that that it represents something like a perpetual bond, that there's an income stream, and they can they can see that as a financial instrument that fits into their models. And so we're hearing a lot of interest from institutional investors to jump into the foundations of, I guess, the new trust foundation of the next generation decentralized economy.
Yeah, that's great. And just a quick follow-up on that. The market has seen a lot of changes lately. So how do you think that impacts like Ethereum, or what's your sentiment about that if you're at liberty to comment?
Well, I think this may be controversial, but I think it's been great. We had a massive surge last year. DeFi and even the NFT surge continued into this year, and we really needed a consolidation because I think we're going to see a significant run up as the merge gets closer. So we're kind of the tail that's being wagged by the macro economy dog, and things are very complicated in the macro economy. So, if things get bad, then maybe we'll do okay during that. Maybe not. We'll see. But the macro economy operates on generally larger cycles or longer cycles, usually related to monetary policy. Other factors like wars can affect things pretty badly. Our economy is going to be operating for quite some time on much higher frequency cycles. Our cycles are determined by new waves of fundamental innovation, whether it's DeFi 1.0, DeFi 2.0, NFTs, DAOs, etc. And I think the next major fundamental breakthrough will be the merge. So it's been coming for a long time, but when it lands, I think you'll see the markets drip up in anticipation of that, and just the supply demand dynamics and excitement is likely to break through this malaise that we've been in.
Yeah. Well, thank you for instilling a lot of the confidence in the audience today. And
warning, I'm an optimist.
Yeah, we're all gonna be okay. Yeah. And since there are a lot of developers here, and we're also commencing the ETH Shanghai Hackathon today at the summit. Could you share a little bit about seeing all the talents that you're seeing building in this industry? What are some of the personalities and characteristics that you really value for builders in blockchain, and what are some of the things that you look for consensus?
So intellectual honesty and integrity, it's really important. There are lots of projects that treat decentralization as a marketing term. There are a lot of really good projects that are driving towards real, profound decentralization. Being non-judgmental and respectful to the people around you all the time, as much as possible. Yes, being curious and explorative. There's a huge problem and solution space to be explored, and it's essentially infinite. We're moving from an economy based on atoms to an economy based on bits and information and creativity, and there's just so much to invent and explore. And I guess just be empowering of the people around you. If you set up positive feedback loops by putting out good things, it'll come back to you.
Yeah. Have you been seeing more talents coming in from traditional industries into consensus?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's a big flow from the traditional financial world and the Web2 world. I think that's going to increase just for natural reasons, but also just as the global economy gets more challenging, you'll find people find themselves in situations that that financially aren't serving them that well, in addition to not serving them that well in terms of how they feel about getting up and going to work in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned before, the industry does operate at kind of a higher frequency of volatility, and there's a lot of cycles coming in ups and downs in this industry. So for the entrepreneurs and builders currently going through a lot of challenges, what are some of your thoughts on how can people become more savvy and like more prepared in terms of like foreseeing the future and preparing themselves for the different ups and downs in this Web3 industry.
Well, foreseeing the future, I'm not sure I can help with that. But it is a challenging period, and there are difficult aspects to that. There are really great aspects to that too. A lot of the cruft of the legacy economy is getting cleared out, and we're growing exponentially in so many different directions. Yeah. Essentially, there are multiple overlapping exponential trends taking hold, and the amount of growth, the pace of growth, is already difficult to keep up with, and it's going to be astonishing. So it's once we get past this probably few years of reorganization, I think it's going to be a great time to be in the economy anew, or just entering the economy as a young entrepreneur or technologist.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm personally very excited about the kind of the long-term prospect of the industry for sure. And then last but not least, a lot of our audience and participants today are currently in Shanghai, where we're kind of currently at home waiting for the pandemic to cool down, and developers at large in the Chinese community. So could you share a few words of encouragement or thoughts you have for ETH Shanghai and its participants?
As I said, the amount of growth that we're going to see is going to be astonishing. So if you don't have ideas, you can jump on a project that you think is cool. There's so much information out there, so educate yourself. And don't be afraid to explore new kinds of constructs. And I guess think globally. This technology is very global in nature, and so your markets are necessarily global because that's where the network spans. So again, it's a great time to be a young developer, and I guess if you're stuck in your apartment, build something.
Yeah, and it's consensus hiring.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, I should probably say that. You see, yeah, we're in a very big growth mode. So send messages to joseph.lubin @consensus.net, and I'll route them.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll make sure people take down that notes. All right. Well, yeah, it's been a great pleasure chatting with you, Joe, and thank you for sharing all the insights. We're really excited about the merge and everything coming up with the Ethereum community and with Consensus.
Cool. Thanks for having me.